Okay, I thought I'd talk you through my Trident, tell you a bit about it and the various upgrades and things on this particular bike. Okay, so this is my Triumph Trident T160 1975. So the T160 is the last of the Tridents. The Trident started life in 68, I think about 3 weeks before Honda uh, launched the 754. So for like 3 weeks, it was an amazing start because it had an amazing three cylinders as opposed to two. And then literally, I think 2 or 3 weeks later, Honda announced their 754, which rather stole the limelight. Um, so yeah, in 68, they brought out the T150, and then in 72, 73, something like that, they brought out the T150V, which is basically a Trident, a T150, but with 5 gears, V for 5. And then in 75, they brought out the T160, which is a very revised T150. And they were trying really to catch up with the Japanese since the Honda 754 came out, as we said in 68, late 68. And then, of course, the amazing double overhead cam 4 cylinder Kawasaki Z1 came out in 72 stroke 73. With all electric start and so on and so on. So they were Triumph and Norton, because by then they were MVT, Norton Villiers Triumph. They were desperately trying to catch up, and this was kind of like the last throw of the dice. They brought out this bike and the Norton Commando 850 Mark III, both at the same time. They were the same stable really at the time, and but it only lasted a year. It was sort of too little, too late. Then the whole thing collapsed. The only thing that carried on after that was the Triumph Bonville at Meriden, because MVT had collapsed, but Meriden carried on because they had the workers' cooperative. They had a lock-in at Meriden and said, no, we're just going to carry on working even though the company's gone bust. And they struggled on with the Bonville for a few years until, I think, with Tony Benn and that, until the funding was eventually pulled by the government support, and that kind of ended things. But then later on, LF Harris bought Triumph and started to remanufacture them sometime in the 80s. I'm a bit vague on that, which lasted a few years, the LF Harris Bonvilles. And then that went until Bloor, is it? Bought the Triumph name in the late 90s and early 90s, whenever it was. And new Triumphs were then made. But this is a 75 Triumph Trident T160. So when Triumph developed it, they went back to traditional Triumph lines, sweeping, styling. The sort of they tried different styling with the T150s and the BSA Rocket 3s. It didn't quite work. They hired Oval Design to try and sort of make them modern, but it just didn't work. Basically, I think there's a whole sort of book in there somewhere as to why it didn't work, but it didn't really. So they went back to traditional sort of swooping lines for the T160, and I think it's a very beautiful bike. The Rocket 3s, the BSA Rocket 3, always had an inclined engine, whereas the T150s had a vertical cylinders. And I think Triumph finally acknowledged that the Rocket 3 looked better with the inclined cylinders. So the the T160 also has inclined cylinders. Now, my opinion, and it is just my opinion, is that it just looks better. It looks beautiful. Officially, the reason is that you could fit electric start and there was better cooling and so on. But I think they're really just sort of like, they didn't want to say it just looked better, because you can fit electric start to a T150 even though it's still got the vertical cylinders. There's plenty of room. As you can see, there's quite a gap between the starter and the cylinders on a T160. So, I just think it is a beautiful bike, beautiful engine. So when they brought it out, this is the American version. So it's got the slightly smaller tank. Again, I'm going to probably get it right anyway. It's a smaller tank, 3 gallons, is it? Can't remember. Whereas the sort of British version has a much wider tank. Is it 4.5 gallons, something like that? Don't quote me on it. But the American had the smaller tank. The British has the wider tank. And this is American. I think this was an American export, which was re-imported at some point before I bought it. So because it was 75 with safety legislation and so on, it's got the left-hand gear change and the right-hand rear brake, because that was coming in, I think, in the American market. So what Triumph did, of course, they couldn't afford to have a new engine and so on, so they simply blanked off like the gear change on this side, and they put a big through bolt. I'm trying to think of the word, cross shaft. That's the word they use. A cross shaft which goes right the way through the engine to allow the gear change on this side, and then the gear change actually goes all the way across the engine back to this side, and the gear change actually takes place under this cover. Because of course they were strapped for cash. They were trying to catch up, but they didn't have, they couldn't build a completely new bike. They also fitted the electric start. It's got 5 gears, by the way, standard. They fitted the electric start, which works quite well. It doesn't work that well on the Commando because it's got those 2 huge, great big pistons going up and down at the same time. It takes a huge amount of torque. Whereas this being the triple, is a 270-degree crank, I think. So there's not as much mass to be turning over, and so that the starter motor works fine. Yeah, and they fitted it with a rear disc brake, and they fitted it with a single front disc brake. Again, they're trying to catch up, and it's a beautiful bike. And as everyone says, had this probably been launched in '68, when the original T150 was, then it had probably been a winner. But 7 years later, it was too little, too late, really. But it is a beautiful bike. So yeah, it's fitted with triple carburetors. It's, as I say, 5 gears. You've got your disc brake, and they did things like they tried to fit a binnacle for the lights rather than them being in the headlight. An actual instrument binnacle. They tried to modernise it. We've got switches. My word, they're actually labelled rather than the standard Lucas, which is sort of guess what the switch does. A bit like on this side, it doesn't tell you what the switches do. So like mine, that's the start button, so I've painted it green. On this side, it does tell you, what does what, and that is a kill switch. Okay, yeah. And all Tridents and Rocket 3s, I think, they all had oil coolers fitted as standard. Throughout the range, they always had an oil cooler. Okay, I think that's sort of pretty much the bike as standard, and a beautiful bike it is as well. Then I'll try and remember, I'll go through the various sort of things that I've upgraded and so on and changed on my bike to make it slightly different, as I'm not in any particular order. So to begin with, I completely rebuilt it about 10 years ago now, and it's virtually all stainless steel. So there's about sort of 4 nuts and bolts on this bike that are not stainless steel, and they're ones that have to be steel because they're just a little bit stronger. So it's all stainless steel, and then there's a lot of extra chrome plating and so on. So for instance, the engine plates, the exhaust hangers, even the brake torque arm, and so on, they've all been chromed. The side stands chromed, and again the engine plates and everything. The instrument binnacle, that should be black, but I had mine chromed. I've gone through it. I like a bike that's got a bit of show. I like a little bit of bling. That's me. So, oh yeah, the rear mud guard. I've a chain guard. So things like, so it's all stainless steel throughout, and or chromed. So I've also got stainless steel hoses for the fuel, stainless steel braided hoses, and I've also got braided hoses for the various oil pipes around the engine. They're all braided hoses as well. Okay, stainless steel braided. So I've tried to use stainless steel wherever. I think the rear brake pedal, I think I chromed that as well. So, you know, I've plated various things that were painted or whatever originally. Then we've also got twin disc conversion. They were always just single disc. They were never made as a twin disc. But then, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, something like that, they started to make, is it a right hand? I think the disc was on the left. I'm trying to remember. So you could fit a second disc before, but they never, this right hand fork leg was never made to carry a caliper. So the only way you could do it would be to use a left hand fork leg turned round, so you couldn't really put the mudguard on it. So the caliper was in front and the mountings were stuck out this way, but you could do it for racing and that. Anyway, about 10, 15 years ago, they started to actually manufacture a right hand leg with the mountings for the extra caliper. So to convert to twin discs, you have to buy this fork leg, and then it's twin discs, which is great. And then you've got an uprated caliper, uprated master cylinder, sorry, which is a slightly bigger bore. You need a slightly bigger bore because it's twin discs, so you're obviously moving more fluid because you're moving fluid into two calipers. So that's a slightly bigger bore master cylinder. One thing that does annoy me, I've got uprated calipers on the front, grind meter, and an uprated caliper on the rear, again grind meter. And again, I've got all stainless hoses for the brakes and so on. One thing that does annoy me with these is that the Gamica calipers, the calipers appear to be deep enough, but not the pads. So if you look closely, get down, dear me, you can see that it doesn't clear the last half inch of the disc. The pads only go down to there, and so you can see it probably better on the rear disc, which is sort of rusted a bit more. See that last half inch down here where the pad doesn't clear, which is a bit of a pain. So I'm at the moment investigating to see if I can get some deeper brake pads which will sweep the whole disc, because you've got 3 discs, but each one is only operating at 80% efficiency, because only 80% of the pad is 80% of the disc is actually swept by the brake pad. That's a bit annoying. But yeah, they're all uprated and work well, very well. You can lock the rear wheel up, no problem. Although they are a real pain to bleed, but when they're bled, the rear brake caliper, when they are bled, they work really well. But they are a pain to bleed. Then we've got Barani style to be official. I put Barani alloy rims on. So they're alloy, they're not stainless steel. Okay, and they come up, they look like chrome, but they're not. They're alloy, they just polish up really nicely. So they're a bit lighter. The thing with, if we're going to go into a little bit of detail, the advantage of an alloy rim is it's lighter, so you generally save weight. But also it gives you less unsprung weight. Now, as any sort of racing bod will tell you, that unsprung weight will give you better handling. Now, unsprung weight is the weight before the suspension. In this case, our forks. So anything from there down is unsprung weight. So the wheels, the mudguard, the calipers, the disc brakes, and the hub, etc. That's all unsprung weight. And the less unsprung weight you have, the better basically a car or a bike will handle. So one reason for having alloy, I've just got them because they look good. Because of course the downside of fitting twin discs is you've got much better braking, but obviously that massively increases your unsprung weight. So it's a bit of a trade-off. But I didn't get it for the unsprung weight. I just got them because they look decent. Of course, they are more delicate because they're alloy rather than a hard steel. So that's something. So just something to bear in mind. But I think they look really good. And obviously, I don't do off-road or anything like that, so they're fine. What else? Where are we going to go next? Yeah. So then I've got triple these are what we call Premier carburetors. You always had 3, but this AMAL now make the Premier carburetors, which have better slides in them, and they have above all a removable pilot jet, so you can A, change the size of the pilot, and B, get in there to clean the carbs out because they're prone to blocking. You've got extended ticklers, you've got stay-up floats in the bottom. They're just generally, but they cost a fair bit more, but worth it, I think. Then I've put open bell mouths on mine. Normally there's a big air filter at the back. I think a sort of downside of that a bit is that I've spent 10 years trying to get my carb to work properly. So what I've got at the moment is I should have 17 pilot jets, and I've gone up to 21. I should have size 4 throttle slides, and I've gone down to 3. All these things rich in the mixture. My pilot jet should be my needle jet should be 106, but I'm now on 106.5, and the needle position is as high as possible, and the main jet should be 150, and I've got 160. So I've gone richer all the way through the rev range because we're taking that much more air in. Hopefully I've got it sorted now. What else we got? Then I've got LED headlight in and LED rear brake and running light on the back. The advantage of that is that I always ride with my lights on. I always do, it's just me. I think it's safer. And so that takes obviously a lot of strain on the battery. So having an LED light means less strain. But then I've also got a Podtronics regulator rectifier, which you can't see, I'm afraid, because it's mounted behind this side panel. But that's an uprated from Boyer Branson, is it? It's an uprated regular rectifier, which gives much better charging anyway. I've also got an AGM battery, absorbed glass mat battery from Motobat. What's that? MBT X20U. That's kind of upside down. I think that's the biggest battery you can put in a Trident. Obviously you want a big battery to drive the starter, and also you want much thicker cables that go to the starter and earth than were supplied originally by Triumph. I've then got Tri-Spark electronic ignition, part of which is in the points cover, and then I've got the black box here. Now the reason for that is that was all I could buy when I rebought this 10 years ago. Excuse me. The modern ones, the whole thing fits under the points cover, and you don't need this separate black box. And I think they work fine from what I know, but when I did mine 10 years ago, they hadn't sort of like invented that yet, so you had to have this black box. Also under here is 2 things. I've got the main thing is I've got the connection here for a relay, for the neutral light. So I've got an uprated neutral light, which means one thing with Tridents is you trying to find you can find neutral, but the neutral light won't come on. It's a pain. It you're in neutral, but the damn light doesn't come on. It's a nightmare. So I fitted this uprated system from Tribbles Unlimited in Greece, and that uses what's called a proximity. And there you can see, look, it's lit up there. You see the little light there? That shows that it's all working. Difficult to fit, expensive, but great. Then I've got an uprated oil warning and charge light from Improving Classic Motorcycles. I think that's what they're called, Improving Classic Motorcycles. That's the name, you can look it up. And they make all these sort of uprated warning lights. So what I've got here, I'll turn it off for a minute. So on here, this tells me if the battery is not charging or charging low. It tells me if the battery is overcharging, and it tells me, very importantly and very clearly, if I've got low oil pressure. So it's a 3-way warning light. very clever. So if the battery isn't charging, the light comes on and it'll stay solid. That's with the engine running. If the battery is overcharging, then I'll get a very slow flash, a bit like the one we've just seen. If I've lost oil pressure, low oil pressure, it flashes like a mad thing. And it's an LED. It's really bright, so you can't miss it. So when I turn the ignition on, it's quite clever. It just flashes like that to tell me that everything's working fine. And as you can see, it's very, very bright because it's an LED. So, but when you're riding along, if it flashes really fast, you can't miss it. It means telling you that you've got low oil pressure. So it's a very clever gizmo. I love it. And that's just telling me that when I start it, that'll go out. As I say, solid light, undercharging, slow flashing, overcharging, going mad, oil pressure low. And the very clever thing about it is that the low oil pressure warning overrides the others. So let's say your battery isn't charging and you suddenly lose oil pressure, it'll always flash the low oil pressure. That overrides the other. Clever. Yeah, so we've got the black and white, black and silver number plate. You used to only be able to put a black and white one on models up to, I think it was March 73, I think it was. But then they changed the tax system, and inadvertently changing the tax system meant that you could put a black and white number plate on. And I think that goes up to 1980 now. And then they sort of realised the mistake and they've changed it. So I think whilst maybe the tax class changes from 80 onwards, you cannot put a black and white number on. So now any bike or car manufactured before sometime in 1980, you can use black and white. Obviously this is 75, so it's fine. Previously that would have been illegal. You have to use yellow, but now the law's changed. You've got choke here. You can take the choke off. It's okay. It will run without it. Oh yeah. So another thing I've got here, on the primary, I've got a belt drive in the primary. Now, the reason for that is that the primary chain that was used in the T160 is one-off. It's unique to this bike, made by Reynolds, not made for anything else. And I think Reynolds kind of went or whatever. So that chain is now completely unobtainable. No one makes one. So when I rebuilt this bike 10 years ago, I decided to put on a belt drive because that was the only alternative. Now you can buy a chain conversion. So you can fit a chain, not the original one. You have to change the sprockets, but you can fit a chain drive conversion. Whereas mine's a belt drive. If I'd have been able to have chain drive at the time, I would have fitted it, but it wasn't sort of invented at the time. So mine's a belt drive. So every few years I have to change the belt, because on a Trident, the primary chain has to run in oil, the primary chain case, because the oil is shared with the engine. So that means the belt is running in oil, and that means it's not good to have a belt sitting in oil, but you can't do anything about it. In a Commando, the primary oil is separate, so you can run a belt drive with no oil in it because the clutch doesn't need oil. Although in here the clutch is not in the primary chain case in a Trident. It's got a single dry plate clutch behind that. But mine's a belt drive. Then here I bought a Dave Madigan breather kit because, of course, I haven't got the air filter, and that's just allowed me to fit this little aftermarket engine breather here, which I change every so often. And I should have an alloy plug there, but it fell out one day, and so I just put a rubber plug in. That's where the air used to go to the big old air filter. But when you buy the Dave Madigan conversion, you get an alloy plug, which I've lost. Right, good. Right, yeah, a couple of things I forgot. Of course, the first thing I should have mentioned was, of course, the petrol tank, which is this is definitely not an original colour. This is totally custom, and this was actually done before I bought the bike, and I think it was done by a company called 8 Ball Paints near near Derby, I think in Ripley, I'm not sure. Pearlescent, so it's like metallic, red, white, and blue. The sort of the finish of the tank, the with the flashes, that's the style is fairly Trident, but not the colours. So that's a totally custom tank. And the second thing is that I have an anti-drain valve, an anti-wet sump valve fitted to mine. Tridents are prone to wet sumping, which means that all the oil in the oil tank slowly drains, or quite quickly drains, into the sump. Now that in itself isn't too bad, because especially on a Trident, because it's got the three pistons, they all go up and down at different times, so you don't pressurize the crankcase that much. If the crankcase was full of oil and there was a lot of pressure, like on a Commando, then when you start it, that oil's being pressured and it's got to go out somewhere, and you've got leaks and so on. Not so much on the Trident. The problem you got, really, you could therefore start a Trident, is what I'm saying, and a couple of minutes and it'll pump all the oil back into the oil tank and everything should be okay. The only problem you got is if all the oil, and this can happen quite quickly, relatively quickly, if all the oil in the tank drains into the sump, then when you start the bike, there's no oil going into the oil pump, so no oil pressure on the crankshaft. And you'll only get oil pressure when there's pumped oil back into the tank, then it's come through to the oil pump and then to the crankshaft. So that's the thing you've got to worry about. So I fitted an anti-drain valve. Now, everyone and their sort of dog will rail against anti-wet sump valves. They're dangerous, they're this, that, and the other. I fitted them to all my bikes. This Trident, my T150V that I've now sold, and my Norton Commando. I've never, ever, ever had any trouble with them. I do have oil warning lights on all of them. I've got an oil pressure gauge on the Commando because it doesn't come with an oil warning light. I've got uprated lights on this so that I can, if there is any ever oil pressure loss, I've got it straight away. I've never had a problem. And I think the advantages of not having the wet sumping, for me, far outweighs any worry about the drain valve, especially because I've got this oil pressure warning light that's so obvious to see. It works very well. So I swear by them, but most people swear at them and will tell you, oh, don't fit that, and they'll immediately quote you various stories about a friend, never them, a friend whose engine was ruined by fitting one, and so on. Yeah. Okay, I think that's probably about it. Right, so yeah, I think there's probably some other stuff, but yeah. Obviously, all the engine was all vapor blasted that when I rebuilt it. Then the outer covers were all highly polished, so that's why the engine looks so clean. And that's the advantage of a rebuild. You can then vapor blast everything and get it all lovely and nice again. But that's my Trident. And it's mine. You may think, you may not like what I've done. It's very personal. I love it. Obviously, it was my Trident. That's why I did it, because I love it like this, with lots of chrome and bling and nice little upgrades that I like. Because it's my bike. Now you might be sitting there. Some people undoubtedly be sitting there. Oh, no, don't like that. Oh, why's you done that? That's tough. It's not your bike. You do what you want to your bike. I'll do what I want to my bike. Full stop. I hate it when people come, oh, you didn't want to do that. Yes, I did want to do that. That's why I did it. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Okay. Yeah. So, we've been waffling on for a while. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start the bike up. Yeah, I'll start the bike up now, but then I'll probably going to do a separate video of the bike running as well, because I think most people would have probably fallen asleep or switched off by now. So I will video the bike running now, but I'll also do a separate video of the bike running, because I think most most people will have given up watching by now. Anyway, there we are. My Triumph Trident, 1975 Triumph Trident T160. Right, okay folks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the bike up now, but what I've done is I've changed camera, so that's why the bike suddenly looks a bit different, because on my phone, the microphone on my phone, it can't handle the sound of the bike, so that when it starts up it kind of compresses the sound in some way to sort of defend itself, and it honestly sounds like the bike is running underwater. It sounds terrible. So I'm hoping that my GoPro camera, that the sound will be better. So I'm going to start up my bike. This is my 1975 Triumph Trident T160, and so I'm just going to start it up now, and hopefully the sound will be good. So what we got? I'm going to turn the petrol on. I've got 2 taps. I'm going to put them both on because I know I've got virtually no petrol in the tank at all. Then we're going to tickle the carbs because it's cold down here. It's in the basement, so we're going to tickle that carb. There we go. And then on a T160 we've got a special lever that enables us to tickle the carb without having to reach in, which is great. Because on a T150 Trident or Rocket 3 you have to try and reach across and try and tickle that middle carb, which is damned hard. Right, I'm going to try leaving the choke off even though it's very cold. We'll see what we got. Might start, might not. Ignition on, and that's my oil warning light telling me that everything's working. I'm in neutral. We've got the electric start switch there, so we'll give it a go. Right, and because we're down here and because of the neighbours and one thing, that's about as long as I dare run it. But I'm really hoping that you could hear that properly, unlike with my normal phone when it just sounds, well, it sounds like it's underwater. It's terrible. Anyway, there we go. That's my 75 Triumph Trident T160, and hopefully all sorted. Hurrah.